Hello everyone, and welcome to our workshop on supporting our children and young people with social media. My name is Emily Misen. I'm an assistant psychologist in the Psychology in Schools team as part of Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust.
And I'm Dr. Beth Mosley, consultant clinical psychologist, working in the same team and the same service.
Great. So just a little overview of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to start just by thinking about what is social media and what we mean by social media for the purposes of this workshop, and also thinking about how young people are using social media. We'll then go on to think a little bit about kind of what the evidence base is around social media and mental health, and what the literature out there is saying about this kind of topic. We'll then go on to think about some of the potential risks around social media. We will be quite balanced within this workshop, or we hope to be, about kind of benefits and risks, but there are some things that we will be highlighting. And then we'll move on to thinking about what can we do as parents. And within that, we'll be looking at kind of availability and also curiosity and showing an interest in the world of our young people, including this kind of online world. We'll also think about protecting non-digital time and kind of family time, and also about modelling our own use of social media. So just to start, what is social media within this kind of definition? So the definition that we've got from the ever trusty Wikipedia is social media are interactive technologies that facilitate the creation and sharing of information, ideas, interests, and other forms of expression through virtual communities and networks. Now that's a little bit vague, so I'm just also going to talk a little bit about what we're not going to be talking about. So we're covering today specifically about social media use rather than screen use or technology use generally. So we're not going to be talking about kind of gaming and things so much, but there is elements of kind of streaming and things that can be considered social media. So another definition that I saw that I think is quite interesting, obviously internet-based apps, but what they highlight is that it's around user-generated content. So if you think about all of these social media apps that you can see, the icons that I'm sure lots of you are familiar with, it's around user-generated content. And it's generally on these sites, individuals or groups have their own profile specifically for a particular site or an app. And then the services will kind of facilitate the development and connect people with other groups. So it's very much around that kind of user-generated content. So we just wanted to start by thinking about what your relationship is with social media. Do you use social media? Do you spend a lot of time on social media? Just generally anything about kind of your own use of social media to share, just to give us a sense. So you might love it, you might hate it. You might hate it, but still use it all the time. I think that's quite a common one. Okay, so people saying use it a little bit. Daily interaction. Okay, so using it quite a lot. Never use social media, and that was a conscious choice. Okay, so that's really interesting. So I guess your perspective might be quite different from some of the people who are saying that they use it daily or a lot. People needing to limit it, and people saying that they use it for work and personal as well. Okay, so we've got a real mix here of people using it daily and some people using it very rarely or not at all. Facebook and Instagram particularly. And I think we will touch a little bit on the types of apps that young people tend to use, which might necessarily not be the same as the apps that we would use as adults. Okay, great. And what do you find, obviously, if you use social media, what do you find valuable about it? Okay, entertainment, keeping up to date. Yeah. Catching up with friends, yeah. And I think that's, for lots of us, that's the really big draw, keeping in touch with people that we don't necessarily speak to all of the time, but yeah, keeping track of, yeah, people saying that they can keep track with people that they don't see often, and messaging people abroad and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really big element of what makes social media so popular. It's a really easy way of keeping in contact with people who you might not be on the phone to all the time, and you might not have really regular communication with otherwise, but you don't want to completely lose touch. And then there's also some people talking about using it for work and community things as well, and also news. So yeah, absolutely. And what about social media do you find difficult or unhelpful? So I guess what are the cons or the downsides? And for people who don't use it at all, this might be kind of why you don't use it. Comparison, doom scrolling, saps time. Yeah, absolutely. Bit addictive. Lots of people talking about comparison, and we will go on to talk a little bit about kind of social comparison and things later. Fake news, warping the truth, fake mental health advice, lots of fake news. Wow, fake news is a big one. Okay, so we're getting lots of time wasting, we're getting lots of comparison, and we're getting lots of fake news. And absolutely, but isn't it interesting that despite all these cons, we also, a lot of us still really spend quite a lot of time on it. Procrastinating, adverts, yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. So it's really helpful, we thought to start just by thinking a little bit about how you use social media. Because some of that will be the same as why your children use social media, and some of it might be different, because there are differences in generation. So the results here come from the Ofcom report from 2022, so last year, so it's fairly recent. And this is about the percentage of 3 to 17-year-olds that use the following platforms. So YouTube is obviously really far out in front there. So if you think this is all ages from 3 to 17, that's quite a staggeringly high percentage, nearly 90%. TikTok, it's really interesting, that's come up massively. So obviously 3 years ago, even nobody used TikTok. It wasn't even included on these things. I don't even know if it existed 3 years ago. I think it must have, but it's certainly really shot up. And then Instagram is kind of always quite popular, and Facebook has really decreased in popularity. So again, if you were asking this 5 years ago, Facebook would have been right up there, but amongst young people, it's really not as popular as it is amongst, say, my generation or Beth's generation, and I'm sure lots of your generations. We just thought it was helpful to start with this, just to point out, firstly, just how prevalent use of some of these sites are, even amongst really very little children, because this is just, again, 3 to 17-year-olds. But also just thinking about whether these social media sites are the same ones that you use or not, because they are all very different, and the sites that you use might be quite different to the sites that your children are using. Oh, we've gone backwards.
I don't think we have.
No, we haven't.
There's a
Sorry,
lag on Slido where it's
okay, so we're back to Slido. So this is now about what your concerns are about your child's social media relationship. So we've already explored a little bit about the things that you find problematic for yourself, but I guess we're wondering about what your concerns are about how your children's use of social media. So too much time spent, yeah, absolutely, and that's a really big difficulty for a lot of people. Keeping them safe online, so yeah, that worrying about kind of what are they accessing, I guess, and linked to that connecting with people that you don't know, and worry about who they're chatting with, all of that kind of online safety. But also lots of people, again, talking about comparison and comparing themselves to celebrity or to fake worlds, things that that you don't want your children to compare to. Body image concerns, which, yeah, we'll touch on that later as well, and peer pressure as well. Okay, so the most common seems to be about the sheer amount of time that is being spent on it, which is really common, but we have also got lots of people worried about the safety and what their children might be accessing online. also that's interesting, losing the ability to talk to people in real life and loss of kind of face-to-face human communication. Okay, increases anxiety attacks. Interesting. We will talk a little bit about what the evidence base is around kind of mental health. Okay, so these results here are from, this is just reporting parental concerns about social media use, and you can see that this is, a lot of this is very similar to what you've just raised in the Slido. So wasting too much time is very high. There's a lot of concern about that, and being distracted from other things in life. I guess it's interesting to highlight that the top one on here is being exposed to explicit content, which isn't something that came up so much directly in our Slido. But I should say that these figures are from an American research centre, so it is possible that there are some slight differences. But most of these things are things that you've all highlighted. So feeling pressured to act a certain way, being harassed and bullied by others online, problems with anxiety and depression, and lower self-esteem. So all of those things are things that you've talked about. Now, we wanted to highlight this study. It's really, social media and mental health is really quite controversial as a topic. So there's, even amongst published research, there's a lot of disagreement about the impact it has. This is a study from the University of Oxford, which was a really big study. There were over 300,000 teenagers and parents. And the findings were that, yes, there was a negative relationship between social media use and mental health, but it was very, very small. So there was actually a quote from the study that said that screen use itself has a tiny association with youth mental health. They found that it contributed to 0.4% on young people's mental health. And they also, within the same data, were able to demonstrate that that was roughly equivalent to the impact of eating potatoes as part of your diet. That had quite a similar association level. So it's a very, very small link. And it's really not clear. So even amongst looking at quite a lot of research papers that we looked at when we were pulling this together, they were really unclear. So some studies were finding that there were links, but others were finding that there weren't. And what is important to highlight is that even amongst those studies that did find a link, there was very, very little evidence of this link being causal. So it might be that young people who have poorer mental health are spending more time on social media, but what we don't know is whether it's the social media that's causing the poorer mental health, or whether it's young people who have poorer mental health anyway are then not going out and socialising as much and potentially spending more time on social media than other young people. So even in studies where they are finding that there is a link, that link is at the moment not being found to be causal. It's an association rather than a kind of cause and effect result. Okay, so this, Beth, were you wanting to do this slide or shall I continue?
You continue.
Okay, so this is a slide just about how teenagers perceive social media use, because we thought it was really important to also highlight that. This comes from the same research as the last one, the parental view. So the majorities of teenagers say that social media provides them with a space for connection, creativity, and support. So if you look at this overall, that's 80% of teenagers are agreeing that using social media makes them feel more connected to what's going on in their friends' lives. 71% that they've got a place where they can show their creative side, which I think is something that perhaps as parents we're not always recognizing, because a lot of, certainly the social media that are used by generations kind of adults, so the Instagram and Facebook, are possibly not as creative as some of the social media types that are being used by young people. So young people who are making TikTok videos, for example, that can be something that's quite creative. And there's also young people talking about feeling more accepted as a result of social media. They're also more likely to say that these sites have had a positive rather than a negative impact on them, largely due to friendships and connections. So overall, there's only 9% feeling that overall it's a more negative. The majority feel that it's neither positive nor negative, but there is nearly a third of young people feel like social media does have a positive impact. And largely, when you look at the reasons why, this is because of connection and socializing, but also some people talking about learning and information gathering, but also just entertainment. So we just thought it was important to highlight that. And then going on, we also just wanted to highlight this around the percent that agreement between parents and young people's views on social media. So this is back to the Ofcom, so the UK report. And this is about the internet generally, just to as a bit of a proviso, rather than social media. This is about general kind of online use. So obviously there's lots of people talking about it being beneficial for schoolwork. But there's also about 2/3 thinking that it's beneficial for building and maintaining friendships, which is largely going to be the social media websites. And there's also, again, creativity and finding out useful information about personal issues, which, again, we will go on to talk a little bit more about. But what we thought was really interesting with that was just how much agreement there was between young people and parents.
Thanks, Emily. That's great. And I'm going to hand back to Emily on a slide later on. So thank you, Emily. So we're going to have a bit of a think about some of the things that you've talked about and young people have talked about as being really valuable regarding social media. And that's the element of social connection. We know that one of the biggest predictors of physical and mental health is the supportive and positive relationships people have in their lives. And it's clear from what we've talked about today so far that social media and technology do support and provide opportunities to socially connect to others. And when you speak to young people about this, they talk about the range of support and friendships that they're able to have through the medium of social media. Not only just in terms of supporting existing friends, but also making new friends. Connecting with networks and communities, particularly in areas that young people may be especially interested in, which may be difficult to access in their existing community that they live in. So a really good example of that is young people who might live in a rural community, who have got a special interest in anime, for example, who have found a group of other young people, which might include young adults, who have a real strong interest in anime, and through that community they find opportunities to share their creative interests, share the work that they're doing, and feel less alone with having quite a specialist interest. Again, when you speak to young people, and we do a lot of speaking to young people about this, they describe, particularly for those young people within a minority group, for young people who might identify as LGBTQIA+, they talk about the opportunity to create and make friends and meet friends who perhaps are also trying to make sense of their gender identity, and other minority groups as well. So other ethnic minority groups who may be living in an area which have limited access to other young people within that ethnic minority may well use social media as a way to connecting to other young people. We also know that social media can often offer a place where young people, when they are distressed or concerned about something, can reach out for confidential help and support. And not just help and support, but also learning about something that might be coming up. A really simple example is my daughter and I were going to the dentist, and she had a filling. And as soon as she knew she was going to have a filling, the first thing she did was go onto social media to look at all of the posts about fillings. And literally on the drive to the dentist, she knew more than I've ever known about fillings in my life. And she'd learned that information incredibly quickly. So I think young people, when they are not sure about something or something's happening in their life, they will go and they will look, they will search, and they'll get a whole range of videos. And some of those might be made by adults, some of them might be made by other young people. And again, as we go back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of what's real, what's fake, our children are having to really learn to develop the skills around what's the information they can rely on and what's the information that they don't want to rely on. So for my daughter in that example, she really needed to have her own experience of going to the dentist and having a filling and work out which of those posts were an accurate representation for what her experience was and which weren't. So there's something here about our young people developing the skill, but potentially having to develop that skill through some lived experience. And of course, things that young people are going to see on social media where they're not going to have the opportunity to have that lived experience. And that's where we're thinking later on about how can we help young people? We can help young people by having conversations with them, really open conversations to explore some of these topics and offer a balanced approach to making sense of this. Another thing to consider is peers are often using these platforms to share their concerns with one another about other peers and also offering advice and guidance to one another. So young people who might be struggling and are worried about another young person in their peer group will gather on these platforms in live chats, and they will talk to one another about what is happening in that other young person's life or happening in their group. And this is absolutely true for something that's happened locally in Suffolk, a real tragedy recently. And the young people that I've spoken to know about it because within their social media platforms, they're talking to one another about this event. They're comforting one another. They're making sense of it together. As you said earlier, young people are spending a huge amount of time on these platforms, and some of what they're doing is quite passive. It's looking at information, and some of it's more active. They're engaging in conversations with one another. And we're going to move on to think about how we can protect and support our young people, because if they are having these conversations with one another, potentially without adults to guide and support them, that can lead to some challenges. And the other thing really to be to kind of make sense of is the content. It feels really relatable to them. I often say to my daughter, why has this got 3 million likes? I don't understand it. It's like 10 seconds of a person pulling a face with some music and a bit of text. I just can't get what makes this post so popular. And my daughter just says, it's relatable, Mom. I get it. From that one tiny micro movement that guy does, I totally get it. And I can completely relate to it. And so I think that's a really important thing to hold in mind. Stuff that feels benign to us, that seems pretty pointless and doesn't make sense. And how on earth can somebody be that popular with such crap content, or what might seem to us like not very good quality content, actually feels really relatable to a lot of our young people. And I think there's something here, and we're going to talk a lot about this, is about how can we be more curious about what makes it relatable, because some of this stuff feels completely unrelatable to us. But then if I think about the things that I look at on social media, which particularly around women of the same age group of me, you know, juggling a job, juggling having kids, and the kind of comedy value or the relatable content is what makes me feel validated and I'm not alone, and it just lightens up some of the challenges that I face in my life and makes it feel lighter and more manageable. And few other people get this. If somebody's writing a TikTok about this and 1 million people have liked it, then it's not just me that feels like this. So there's something here about the content often feeling that it's really validating young people's experience of the world. The challenge is, with anxiety and low mood, one of the key things that has an influence on both anxiety and low mood is the focus on the negative, getting stuck in cycles of what we call rumination. So going over the bad stuff or the tricky stuff or the stuff you're worried about over and over again on a loop. And we know that rumination plays a huge part in maintaining difficulties with anxiety and low mood. So that focus and preoccupation can lead to a cycle which can increase anxiety and increase low mood. Now, what we know is from some of the research that was done, particularly during the lockdown, is that young people, girls in particular, who were relying on social media platforms to link up with their friends, were tending to struggle more with their well-being because they were getting caught in cycles of what we call co-rumination. So one young person is starting to ruminate on something, they're feeling low or they're worked up or distressed about something. And you can really imagine this in the pandemic, going through all of the possible problems with the pandemic and how it's changed their life. And then another young person adds to that, and you get caught in the cycle. And if you've got adolescent young people who most of you on this call have got, you will have heard these conversations where young people, rather than potentially offering a more balanced approach or supporting a young person break free from that rumination, continue to add to the rumination cycle. And that, sadly, for some in some contexts, can add to anxiety and add to low mood and make a young person feel more distressed rather than less distressed. And again, going back to the idea of lots of young people connecting to one another in moments of high stress, which the phone allows you to do. You can, in the moment that you're absolutely distressed as possible you could be, you can, the first thing, and we often do this, and I do this, I have this habit, something's happened, I need to get on my phone and tell someone. And so our young people, when they're experiencing high levels of distress, may go straight to their phone, straight to another young person or to another forum to share that distress. And what they may get back may not be helpful in that moment. It may escalate the distress further. It might prompt that young person in that moment of impulse and distress to do something unhelpful, like post something, respond in a certain way to a message online. And so that's one of the challenges we have with this instantaneous support, is that your friend's straight there and your friend's straight worked up too, and your friends may be giving you some advice which is going to potentially add to the problem. And whilst you're in that heightened place of distress, you're much more likely to take actions which are not sensible. And the same is true for accessing unhealthy strategies to cope with distress. So if young people are potentially influencing each other, so if a young person in a peer group is using self-harm as a way to manage distress, they may well share that as a way of coping. Also, we know that young people may go to social media for advice on how to manage distress. And what they get back on those streams might not necessarily be healthy strategies, but they may be effective strategies in the short term. We do a parent workshop on self-harm, and it's really important to know that self-harm does provide some relief from distress. The act of self-harm provides relief from distress. So if a young person finds that online in their social media feed, they may, in a moment of distress, try it and work and discover that it is helpful. And they may never have tried that way to cope if they hadn't been exposed to that messaging or that information through social media. The other challenge, and somebody put this in the Slido earlier, is bullying. We know that there's a more propensity for kind of creating further challenges with bullying. So with social media, with our phones, most young people have access to their phones for a big portion of the day, time that they're in school where they may experience some bullying. They go home and there may be no reprieve from the bullying. So when I was at school, and I did experience bullying as a child at school, when I went home and I shut my door, I was free from that. It didn't follow me around. But for young people today, any bullying that might happen in an in-person context can continue to follow them at home. They cannot shut the door on it. it will, if they've got a device. And even if you take their device away from them, they don't have access to it, it is possible that whilst they are not on their device, something has happened in a group chat or in a space, which is a social media space, where that young person comments might have been made about them. And so they may be concerned and worried about what's happening whilst they're not looking at their sites, and if something is going on that could be perceived and felt as bullying. Now, the key really here is about creating a safe space that young people feel that they can turn to adults for help, that they're not going to, I mean, one of the challenges we face is if a young person feels quite strongly about how much they value having their phone and how much they value being on social media and how much they value being on WhatsApp, if they go and tell their parent, oh, I'm being bullied and there's all these people sending these comments on WhatsApp, or these messages have gone onto social media and I'm really distressed about it, one of the big anxieties that they're going to have is that you are going to take their phone away from them, that you're going to restrict their access to their phone. And so a lot of young people will not tell adults because they don't want the phone or the social media to be thrown out the window with the way to respond to bullying. So again, it's thinking as adults, how do we respond in scenarios? What's the culture we create in our home life to enable our young people to feel safe enough to be able to tell us what's going on, both in person and through technology and social media, with a response from us that's going to be balanced enough to acknowledge that, okay, this is happening on social media and this is happening within the use of technology, but we're not going to immediately come down on saying all technology is bad, all social media is bad, this is the problem with phones. We're going to really just think about what we can do in conjunction with school, because schools play a massive part in this. And we know that if things are happening outside of school on group chats that involve other children from school or on social media, letting school know so that they can be involved in dealing with that is incredibly important. For schools, a zero tolerance policy on bullying is a high priority, and it may feel like sometimes that schools are not able to do enough in this space. I think it's really challenging for schools. If you speak to schools about this, this is something they're having to deal with regularly, all of the time, every day. So I would really say that the bullying is a risk online as much as it is a risk in person. The research shows that if people don't tend to be exclusively bullied online, they tend to be bullied in person and online as well. So I think it's really important to hold that in mind, that therefore you need to be dealing with the whole thing, not just the bit that's linked to social media. And it's about kind of creating a space where we can talk this through with young people and help them make sense of it, help them feel protected from it, help them feel like they don't have to put up with this, but in a way that doesn't just write social media off, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you will have experienced yourself this on a social media. If you're on Facebook and some of you said you've taken a break, you know, if you post something and you get a really negative comment or unreasonable comment, it can totally and utterly fill you with so many emotions, and it can really knock you back. And your response may be, that's it, I can't handle this, I'm not going on Facebook. Or you might respond with an assertive response back. You might block that person. We're trying to manage these dynamics as adults. We've really developed emotional systems, and young people are trying to make sense of this and prepare for adulthood with having to deal with these challenges. So there's something about thinking about how we respond to this ourselves if we experience it. And some of that might not be really balanced, and how we can then kind of help our young people respond to that and be a good, safe place for our young people to have these discussions. This is really complex. It's not simple. It's not black and white. And it's about giving that message. It is complicated. And we don't know all the answers as parents, but we really want to help, and we really want to make sense of what's important to you. And the key thing is that it's important for any young person is that they are not bullied, they're not discriminated against, they're not subjected to that. And that's the main issue. And this is just a bit of data here on whether young people experience nasty or harmful things online or in person. And as you can see, quite a lot of young people are experiencing nasty or hurtful things face to face. Then we've got the concerns with technology, and you can really see there that it's texting or messaging apps, and you'll know this yourself. You will have had situations with your child, I am sure, where they've been distressed by what's been happening in a text messaging or app group, or if someone's been booted out of a group or whatever it might be, and also social media sites. But again, we can see some there in the online gaming too. So it's important to hold in mind that this is not just happening on one platform or in one place, and it is also happening face to face, nearly as much as you might see it in any comms technology, which is quite surprising when you consider how much easier in all probability it is to be exposed to nasty or hurtful experiences through technology. Now I'm going to hand over to Emily for this slide.
Yeah, so we just wanted to talk a little bit about body image and social media, because this is probably the area where there is of mental health, whereas there's the least disagreement amongst the literature. So there is a general consensus that social media use is correlated with increased concerns about body image. Having said that, it's really important to be aware that the type of activity that young people, or well, any of us, are doing on social media have been found to have the greatest impact on body image concerns. But what's also important is that the type of activity that someone is doing on those sites is more important than the overall social media time. So what it means by that is that, for instance, if you're someone who's spending ages just really passively scrolling through pictures, and also any image-based activity at all, that is related to more concern than some of the more active things. So if someone's commenting a lot, if someone's watching kind of videos that are not related to, you know, to bodies and things like that, that's less harmful. Content with celebrities in, which I think goes back to what a lot of people talked about earlier about comparison. And what we know is that the levels of body image concerns are very closely related to the levels that we experience what's called appearance-related social comparison. So that's essentially talking about how much we compare what we look like to what other people that we're seeing looks like. And that's important to be aware of, because there's particular types. So these very image heavy sites like Instagram and things, and also anything where you're looking at lots of celebrities, lots of kind of people whose job it is to be very beautiful and attractive in a very stereotypically conventional kind of way, that is going to be more likely to be associated with concerns about body image. But if you're someone who is particularly prone to comparing yourself to these images, which some people are just more likely to do than others, that's what appears to be the driving mechanism behind all of this, how much you're comparing yourself to other people. It is a little bit more complex than that, in that the direction of comparison is important. So when we compare ourselves to people that we consider to be more attractive than us, which is often celebrities and things, that's called upward social comparison, and that has a negative impact on body image, and that is the most common. But there is also evidence that suggests that downward social comparison, which is when we compare ourselves to those who we perceive as kind of less attractive than us, might actually improve body image. But there is less research on that. But I think it's important to highlight, because it does just show the importance of who our children are following and what they're following and what they're spending their time on social media doing, and that it's not even within an area like this where there is less kind of disagreement about the pros and cons of it. There is still nuance within that. And I think it's also important to highlight that sites like TikTok, which have really rocketed in use and popularity significantly over the last few years. There's still very little research into things like that. So the majority of the research is still these kind of very image-based sites like Instagram and things, which although young people are using, as we saw earlier, they're not using them as much as some of these video sites. So we just thought it was interesting to highlight some of those things, and to recognise that, yes, there are difficulties associated with looking at pictures of beautiful people a lot online. And a lot of you talked earlier about things not being real, and being aware of the amount of retouching and things that goes into images that are online, and just making sure that young people are aware of that, because that does make a difference when we are aware of that.
Thank you, Emily. So now we're going to have a think about harmful content. And I guess if we understand that young people are often turning to social media or digital technology to self-soothe and escape difficult feelings. So if you think about your young person's relationship with their phone, which may be with them a lot of the time, if there's some kind of research to suggest that what young people, and what we all do actually, is use social media as a way of distracting ourselves from difficult feelings, and as a way of self-soothing, so trying to make ourselves feel better when we struggle or feel down. And if I skip to the last point on there, where there's a general trend where children are saying they prefer to turn to the online world to resolve issues. It's very instant. It's very one way, in terms of you can ask for what you want, and you can choose what you want, and you can flip between different things. And maybe in some ways children see the online world as being a bit more reliable than what someone might offer them in person. And of course, as a busy parent, when your child is struggling with something, in that moment, you might not be available. You might not have the capacity to be able to provide your child with an immediate response. Whereas for a lot of young people, their phones or friends at the end of their phones do. So it's really important to understand that, that really for young people, their phones and social media is being used as a way to make themselves feel better. And again, with anything, if I use chocolate to make me feel better when I've had a really bad day, if I'm using, having a few bits of chocolate, a chocolate bar, once a week to make me feel better at the end of the day, that's one thing. But if every time I feel terrible, I reach for a chocolate bar, then that's going to become a problem. So it's really thinking about why some of the content online can be so harmful. So when a young person is self-soothing and is feeling distress, or is possibly accidentally finding harmful content online that this feels relatable, then of course that is going to have quite a powerful influence on them. So one of the things that we are aware of is that exposure to self-harm images, or information and content, can be really triggering for young people, and really difficult, because it can for young people who may have used self-harm as a way of coping with feelings in the past, difficult feelings in the past, who may not be doing that now, seeing that content can trigger them to feel distressed and think about using that approach again. And there is a social contagion element to some of these ways of coping with difficulties. And what we mean by that is, by seeing other people doing it, it makes you more likely to do it. And if we think about adolescents who are very influenced by their peer group and what others are doing, they're really vulnerable to potentially doing and trying things out which they may see other people in their peer group are doing. So of course, it's really easy for young people to be exposed to a huge range of content online, which could potentially feel harmful, or expose them to images or information that it could be distressing. The other thing to take into consideration, we're not here to scare you, by the way, we're just being really honest with what's out there. And for some young people, they may never stumble across any of this material, but I think you know, knowledge is power. So for us as parents and as guardians of our young people, I think it's really helpful to be aware of these things, because our awareness means that we can be less afraid of when these things crop up, and we can be better prepared to be available to talk about some of these things. We can do our own research so that if something comes up about self-harm, we don't panic, but instead we think about having a really helpful, balanced, informed conversation about with our young person, who essentially is fishing on social media for information, to understand things, to make sense of things. And so as adults, as parents, we're in a wonderful position to be able to add to that, to contribute to that, and be that kind of trusted person where they can check some of this stuff out. They're only going to do that if they feel like we're not going to panic or overreact or say, oh my goodness, that's terrible, and or be quite judgmental about it. And adolescents are very sensitive to criticism and judgment, and are easily shamed. So it's thinking really carefully about our view of these things and our view of social media, and how we respond and talk about these types of things. And if we're talking about them in a critical, negative, judgmental way, in all probability, it's going to feel much harder for our young people to feel like they can come turn to us when they may have seen something that they're struggling with or to making sense of. And the other thing really to mention here is radicalization, in terms of kind of thinking about in terms of, there's quite a lot of messaging around far right views at the moment. And if you speak to your adolescent, I've got an 18-year-old and a 13, 14, turning 14-year-old. And when I talk about any of this stuff, they are on it, they know it, they've got it, they're consuming so much information that it's intrinsically knowledge to them. And there's this kind of misogyny trend. So we think about someone like Andrew Tate, for example, some of his messaging to young people, you know, it's complicated, it's complex. Some of what these the information that's being shared with young people feels really relatable, it makes sense. And if you think about, someone mentioned grooming earlier on, often the majority of what these people might be saying does actually make sense and feels relatable, and the final 10% is the bit that's rather extreme and unhelpful, and unhealthy. And so it's finding spaces to talk to our young people about these difficulties, accepting that it's complex, that they might be conflicted, because some of what these people might be saying might appeal to them, might make sense to them. And there's a lot of research and conversations with adolescent men and boys talking about how do they make sense of some of this content, and them saying, you know, it's really complicated. There are bits of this that I kind of get and I kind of like, and there are bits of it I really don't like. And I'm trying to use this information to help me make sense of who I am as a man, as a boy, and girls obviously having the same challenges within the influences that they're interfacing with. And I think it's really important just to hold in mind how complicated it is, how much input there is for our young people to make sense of, and then where's the space where they get the support to make sense of this. So we know that if children experience harmful content online, so if they see something that's distressed them, an image or something harmful, many of them will come to and tell someone about it, whether it's an adult or a friend. And with the older age groups, they tend to tell their peers about it. And again, young people are giving each other advice. They're sharing this stuff with one another, and it's making sure that they've also got the opportunity to not just share it with one another, because they're holding a huge amount. So for example, if they're talking about a young person who is in their class, for example, who's broken up with their boyfriend and is struggling, they will be actively worrying about that young person's mental health. They will be talking about it together, and they'll be trying to make sense of what might be going on for that young person. And they're holding a huge amount. And a lot of them are anxious about talking to adults about these things, especially if they involve behaviors that adults wouldn't necessarily agree with or be shocked by, because they're really worried that the adult response is going to be really draconian, it's going to be really black and white. So I think this is happening. Young people are having these conversations, they're making sense of this stuff together. They're often turning to adults, particularly those younger children. They will be turning to adults. So what we're doing with our younger children and how we respond with our younger children is gives us a good sense, and it gives them an experience which hopefully means as they go into adolescence, they will still feel like that we're a person that they can come to and turn to when they're trying to make sense of something that they've seen online. So what can we do as parents? So we're going to have to whiz through this, the usual story, but I have embedded some of what we can do in parents in those talks. So there's something here, and you're probably getting this message through from what I'm saying, about our availability, our curiosity, and our ability to show a non-judgmental interest in their world, even if this stuff makes us feel really difficult. I used to hate TikTok. Now I'm on TikTok producing content for young people and parents that will hopefully feel relatable and helpful. I've had to completely change my view and my relationship with TikTok. And I've had to open my mind to do that. Also thinking about protecting non-digital time. If we know that our phones have an addictive quality, they absolutely do. They produce huge amounts of dopamine, which is the neurochemical that makes us need to keep doing that thing to feel good. Then of course we need to think about how we can protect our children from wanting to be on these social media or their gadgets more than is healthy for them, and modeling. So what we do. So I'm going to really quickly whiz through, and just to say, the research that came from the chief medical officer's research on this talks about these key areas, these common sense areas where we can support young people. And it very much makes sense. We've got to make sure that our social media and our technology use isn't getting in the way of physical activity, isn't getting in the way of education, isn't getting in the way of talking, isn't getting in the way of us having time together, and isn't getting in the way of sleep. So those are the key things. Easier said than done. So this is a really quick question, but I'm really worried we haven't got time. We might have to run over a little bit. So why might teens on a group chat all wear a filter on their face? So when we think about filters, for those of you not familiar, so on TikTok, for example, there's all sorts of crazy filters. You can have a filter, you can have a strawberry face, you can have a giant mouth. Why might they wear a filter on their face? So if they're on a group chat, why might they wear a filter? I really want as many people to answer this question as possible, okay? Because to see if anyone gets the right answer. So why are they right? So it's a group chat. They know the other people. They know the other people on the call. They're friends of theirs. And they're creating a face chat. So lots of things about uncomfortable to look like each other, image conscious, self-conscious, to fit in, to feel better about themselves, to be interesting for a laugh. Okay, to join in, wonderful, follow trends. So it's actually, I don't think anyone, maybe one person's got it. I asked my daughter about this because all of her trusted friends all have funny face filters on. And the reason that they do it is because if anyone screen records the group chat and posts it somewhere else, then their face will not be distinguishable. So I think that's just such important information for us as adults, that our young people are chatting with their friends online in a group chat, having a great time. And they're using filters on their faces so that if one of the people that is in that chat decides to take any screenshots or record the conversation and post it anywhere else or share it with anyone else, that they will not be easily identifiable. So our children are finding workarounds to some of the risks that social media presents. And we as adults, I had no idea. I would never have guessed that. We as adults don't necessarily understand or see that some of the things that our children are doing online actually are for the reasons that they are. So I just think that's really helpful illustration of our curiosity as parents, our ability to be available to have these conversations, to share understanding of the world that our young people in, which is really different from the world that we occupy now and the world that we grew up in, can be so helpful for us to firstly empathize and put ourselves in our children's shoes to understand how complex this is, but also give us the knowledge and power to challenge some of the things that we might see, and just to explore some of the topics that are raised. So really thinking about how can we be more available, how can we show more interest without annoying our kids too much. So how can we be genuinely interested in their world without our children feeling like we're interested to be critical or judgmental, that we're genuinely interested. And I can really say this as a parent who's gone from being quite judgmental and critical about this to move to a position of being genuinely interested. The transformation in my relationship with my young person around that has been massive, because suddenly it just feels like I have a much better understanding of their world and how educated they are in so many ways. And also, I've noticed how much more my young person will come to me to talk about what's going on in their world, how they're no longer anxious about me being seen on a group chat if they're on a group chat. So there's something about that kind of reducing that judgment and reducing that criticism and that kind of, oh, here we go again, I can't believe you're doing this, oh, this is that problem again, if you weren't online so much these things wouldn't happen. Those kind of little comments that I would always make, moving away from that and coming to a position of coming alongside and reserving judgment and providing space to have really healthy discussions. I don't know all of the answers to these questions. I don't really understand exactly what it's like to be in my young person's shoe, but I've got some wisdom from all my years of life and experience, and I've also got the kind of space to be balanced in and have perhaps different things that I can bring to those conversations. So here's some advice you can give to your teen, and this is particularly when they're perhaps being influenced by people that may be having a negative impact on them. Those influences, it's really thinking about what's that content, how's that content making you feel. So helping our children make the link between the content they're watching and how it's making them feel. And some of that might be good and some of that might be bad, and you may do this yourself as an adult when you go through scrolls. There are certain, what social media companies know is, and what the news people know is, what engages. The stuff that enrages us engages us. And so it's being aware of that, being aware that we're vulnerable, we're susceptible to engaging with stuff that's negative, which is perhaps going to make us feel angry. So helping our children make the link between what they're doing online, what they're seeing online, and how it makes them feel. And then training ourselves and helping our young people to train themselves to be quite careful. So they're thinking about, what am I going to click on? Because if that thing that I know is going to make me feel negative, is it worth it? Is it worth going on something which is really sensational? Or should I start making sure that the people I'm following have got some more positive messaging? And we talk to loads of young people, and you'll know this yourself if you follow anyone online. There's loads of positive and helpful messaging which can make you face your day or make you feel like you've got this. And so it's kind of helping support our young people to find some of those positive influences, or if they're getting sucked into the more negative influence, helping them think about which are the people that you follow who make you feel good, who make you feel more positive, and how can you perhaps actively choose to look at their content rather than get caught up with the negative content. And again, thinking about self-care strategies. So it kind of moving away from constantly being online, giving yourself a break. I read some research recently that said just 60-second breaks from anything we do make a huge difference to helping our brain recover from some of the pressure and stress and the overload that we might have. And that's really difficult for young people, because they sort of get sucked in to what they're doing, and it's almost impossible to break free. And so that's what we can think about, and I'm going to come back to that slide in a minute. So how much control do you feel you have over your child's social media screen use? And this is a really interesting question, because I think for many of us, depending on the age of your child, you may feel that you have, if you've got a younger child, you may feel like you've got more control. And if you've got, so I think 5 is complete control and 1 is no control. So for many of you, and I think this is reassuring for other parents on this call, because I'm sure that for the majority of you, constantly feeling like, I'm getting this wrong, I'm not doing this well enough, I'm not restricting their time enough, probably. For lots of us, we're feeling like we've got limited control over our child's social media or screen use. And so that's where we need to think about, how do we create a culture in our household where certain things are protected from online activity? So how do we protect time for non-online activity? And that's really tricky because of the dopamine element, and that's something we haven't got time to talk about today. But what we know is that anything like this, the more you do of it, the harder it can feel to pull yourself away from it. But what can help is having routines and structures where you have protected time. And so thinking really sensibly and pragmatically about sleep, making sure that your child either doesn't have a device in their room, but or if they do at bedtime, or if they do, that it's got screen time on it. And kind of, if you don't do this already, finding ways to collaborate with your young people, because there's no doubt about it, they'll be able to say, yeah, actually my phone probably does get in the way of me getting some sleep. Meal times, just making meal times a time when you put your phones away. And this needs to apply to you as an adult too, because my kids are always saying to me, you're always telling me to get off my thing, Mom, but you're constantly yours. And I say, yeah, but I'm on it because I'm doing some work, or I'm looking at an email, or I'm checking in with my mom. And they're like, yeah, well, it's the same. What's the difference? I'm checking in with my mates. So I think there's something here about how do we protect the key things that we know are good for our well-being: sleep, physical activity, and meal times are really helpful time for us to connect with one another. So what family house rules or structures that everyone has to follow can you build into family life? And you can discuss those with your young people, but hold the boundary and make it easy to kind of for you to follow through with that, by making it something that's doable and achievable. If you say everyone in the household only has an hour on their gadgets a night, you're probably going to fail at that. But if you just protect key points in the day or key points in the evening, you're much more likely to achieve that. Again, providing ample warning to get off devices because of the dopamine element. Young people have a dopamine crash when they come off their devices, which leads to all of this escalation of distress and big arguments. So giving our young people enough warning time to get off their devices, especially if they're gamers. I know we're not talking about gaming today, but then expecting that for a short period of time, and sometimes it's quite a long period of time, after they come off it, they're going to be really grumpy, really sensitive. That's the time, if you're going to say anything like, oh, you've been on that all night, or what, you haven't done this, you haven't done your bedroom, you haven't done your homework, that's the time that you're likely to end up with a massive argument with your child, because that's the time when they're kind of experiencing this low dopamine crash. And until they've kind of started producing their own dopamine again and are back on an even keel, then they're going to be a bit grumpy and a bit difficult to manage. And I'm sure we've all experienced that when we tried to get our children to come out and do something with us outside, and it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour before they actually seem to acknowledge that being outside and doing whatever they're doing with you is okay. Again, we can link their inline interests to doing those things outside, so offline. So they're massively into FIFA, thinking about kicking the football around the garden with them. Anime, which comes out a lot of the stuff that's online, and some young people have a special interest in. So if it's anime online, thinking about, you can buy anime coloring in books for younger children, or anime drawing and artwork. So trying to make sure that we're balancing their interests and activities offline and online, and we might have to provide opportunities for that. I've had to do that with my youngest son. I've had to he's really into the anime stuff, and I had to go and buy some anime coloring in books and say, you're not doing your online, let's sit down together and do this together. And actually, by doing it together, he really engaged with it, and actually for us it was a really positive bonding experience. So this does involve a bit more of us, which is really tough because we often don't have this time, and it's another pressure on us. But try and choose things that are good for you too. Actually, I'm not interested in anime, but sitting down with my son and doing some mindless coloring in was actually really nice for me to get a break from what I've been doing all day. And again, we can create shared social activities that include that screen and that online content, because I think that's really, really important. And I just want to go back to a slide here, and we're obviously going to share do. I'm very going to I'm covering this very, very briefly. I'm not doing it enough credit. If we think about the fact our children are relying on one another and providing each other with support around their mental health, potentially having conversations about self-harm, potentially having conversations about thoughts about ending their life. What I think really is so valuable for us as a parent is to equip ourselves to know how to respond if these things come up, so that we don't feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. Now, we do a self-harm parent workshop. You're more than welcome to come to, and we have a recorded version of that. But Papyrus have some absolutely incredible resources. They have an actual guide for parents to help them think about how they can talk to young people about these issues. And they also have a 24/7 hotline. So just making our children aware of those services will mean that they're in a position to potentially share that with their peers, but also they're aware that you're in a place where you're open to talking about this. You want your child to turn to you if their friend is talking about ending their life or is struggling with self-harm. You don't want your child to have to hold on to that on their own. But you also are terrified of your child doing that, because you're like, well, what am I going to say? Am I going to make it worse? What do I do? And so I think equipping ourselves and looking at this stuff so that we feel better prepared and better equipped is really tough stuff. It's stuff none of us really want to have to face, because it's really tough. And I don't want to make you feel more anxious at the end of this workshop. But I think that there are a small group of young people who are really having these conversations and trying to make sense of things. And so the more that we can do to equip ourselves and have that knowledge, the higher chance that we'll have of being able to feel more confident in responding to our child. And really, it really is about just listening and validating their experience. And if your child tells you something about what's going on for another young person, just really validating that, but also thinking about the role of school and how you could potentially speak to school to make sure that they are aware of some of those difficulties. So I just know myself, from having been more open with my child, that means that they bring more difficult stuff to you, and that creates its own challenges. But if you're prepared and you have a good plan of how you're going to respond to that, it puts you in a much stronger position as a parent, a more confident position. This is really tricky stuff. And the last thing, sorry, we've run so over, this has got to be an hour and 15-minute workshop, modeling. So what we do is going to be the teaching through showing rather than telling. We know that's how young people learn most and best. So if we're telling them what they should be doing, but we're doing the exact opposite, then it's unlikely that they're really going to listen. So our children will learn through what we do and our relationship with things. So just thinking about how often technology can get in the way of your availability for your young person. I mean, I literally, before this call, was in the kitchen with my son. I haven't seen all day because I've been working all day. He came in to tell me a load of stuff, and I was looking on my phone at some work emails, and it was so hard for me to pull my eyes up and just listen to him for 2 seconds, because I was just so consumed with what I was doing, thinking, here I am delivering this workshop to you. It's a constant battle, something I have to work on all the time as a parent, because technology is so embedded in my life and my ability to work and all of those things and stay connected to other people. So what could you do differently with how you interface with devices based on this this talk today? And then we're going to draw this to a close. And thank you for those who've stayed on. There's plenty of you who've stayed on, so I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that we have gone significantly over time. But as we said, it's the first time we've run this workshop. So just what could you do differently with how you interface with devices, which would be kind of a good example setting for your young person? Yeah, great. So thinking about how you can do things together, that's really lovely, actually, doing things together on a screen. There's a few games that I actually quite like, and we do it together on the phone. Pausing, spending less time, limit usage. So learn more about the different apps, absolutely. That kind of being more interested with them, time conscious, giving child full attention. It's so hard to do. It is so hard to do when you're so busy, and children often ask for us at the most inopportune time, and sometimes we can't do it. But what I'll always try and say is, I can't do this right now, but I will be able to in 15 minutes. And then as long as you come back in 15 minutes and do it really well and fully, your child gets to trust that. And that again is really good, because it's helping them hold on to that thing for a little bit, which is a bit different from some of the social media stuff where they get it instantaneously. So this is wonderful. There's some research to show that even having your phone out on a table whilst having a meeting or a conversation or having lunch with someone or meeting up with friends actually distracts from the quality of the conversation. So having your phone visible, even if the face is turned down, will have a negative impact on the quality of the interaction and the conversation we're having. So even those tiny micro things that we're doing, those habits we have, can actually move away from us being fully connected, not just with our children, but with our friends, with our peers, with our work colleagues. So wonderful. This is wonderful to see all these ideas. Thank you. Okay, so just so you're aware, if we're thinking about what's available to young people online, which is helpful for them, there are lots of fantastic apps. And these apps, you'll be able to have a look at them all. There are lots of apps which have been signed off by the NHS. They've also been developed very much for young people to support them in lots of different ways with their mental health. And they're really credible sources. So being aware of these apps and sharing these apps with your child can be really helpful, so that, like you said earlier, you know, what's good mental health advice and what's bad mental health advice. There's so much out there. So if you can give your child safe, legitimate places that they can turn, really important. Combined Minds helps families and friends support young people with their mental health. So that's a good one to look at. And then there is other help out there, which we've covered here. And remember, Kooth is something that all young people can access as a counselling service for free from age 11 to 25 in Suffolk. So that's another good thing to let your child know about. And that is typing based, so they can access that and get that counselling support instigated by them. You wouldn't even need to be aware of it. They can do that themselves. So giving our kids as much tools as possible to get the help and support from the right credible places online when they need it is something we can really do. We've given resources here with all the links. You'll get those through later. So we're finally at the end, and again, it's been 15 minutes over. You were bang on, Emily. It's a 1 hour 15-minute workshop. How helpful you found this workshop. Again, it's the first time we've ever done this workshop. We've crammed an awful lot in. So it's really helpful to have your very honest response to this, because it will help us, if we run this workshop again, make sure we're getting it right for families and parents who, again, you know, you're asking these questions, and because you very much deeply care about your young person. And just the two things you're going to take away. I know you've put information about yourself in terms of what you're going to do differently with your phones possibly, but from the whole workshop, what two things are you going to take away? We know that when we overwhelm you with so much information, it's quite hard to think, what are you going to do differently? Just by saying what two things are you going to take away, you're much more likely to do them or use them. And again, it's helpful for us if we need to cut this down. The stuff you put here, we won't take out. So really interesting. So trying to kind of get a more balanced view. I think everything we're trying to do as parents with our children is helping develop balance. Sometimes when our children are going in one direction, in order to balance it out, our pendulum swings right to the other side. Our kids permanently on social media and they love it. We have to come in with social media is terrible and it's bad for you and it just takes up all of your time. And what we're trying to actually do is support our children be balanced. Social media can be bad sometimes and it can be good sometimes. And it's kind of bringing that together. So this is fantastic.
What we were really keen to do in this workshop, because it is quite a polarizing topic, isn't it? And there's often things out there that do make it seem all bad or all good. And we did kind of want to try and have a bit of balance, didn't we?
Absolutely. So this is really fantastic to see what and yet filters and actually one of the research papers we saw was parents kind of know about filters, and they know about how to kind of use their hubs at home, but they often don't use them. So yeah, that alignment with children's social media use, you'll see a transformation in your relationship with your child. They come and tell you stuff, and it's really interesting. Like myself, having now gone on TikTok, if anyone wants to go and see what I've been trying to do badly, or signpost their children to Dr. Beth Mosley, please do. But it's been an incredibly enlightening experience for me. And one of the things that I haven't said earlier on is about filters. And you mentioned it with the idea about young people and why they might be using filters. Actually, having the ability to use a filter to enhance you slightly, I know this because I use this on my TikTok, takes away a lot of the anxiety about what you're saying, because you're not worrying so much about what you look like. You're actually, and I've seen a lot of young people who are using filters to enhance how they look, who are talking about stuff that is really vulnerable for them. They're really talking about the tough stuff they're facing in their life. And how I viewed that was actually, in some respects, that filter they're using on their face is potentially a shield which gives them the confidence. It's not a filter that means they look like someone else, but it's a shield that gives them the confidence to be able to talk about their internal world, because they're less worried about being judged by their external appearance. So if they can enhance their face with a filter, they feel more confident to talk about some of the stuff that's going on inside of them, because they're less worried about being judged for how they look. And I just thought that was really revolutionized my view of filters and how they aren't all bad. They are sometimes a tool to enable our children to not have to worry about their attractiveness, because they've kind of resolved it by just enhancing their features slightly. Because you can do a skin filter which makes your skin look smoother. You can do a teeth filter to make your teeth look slightly whiter.
Again, though, there's pros and cons with that, isn't there? Because then you are going back into that thing of, if you're using things, it's artificial, isn't it? And then potentially when you're then looking at social comparison,
you can be very disappointed when you look in the mirror and remember what you actually look like. I know, I've been there. But this, we have to hold in mind, this is the reality of our children's world. This is what their world is. It's part of their world. So it's kind of seeing there are positive elements that can be used positively. There are negative elements that can be negatively, but sometimes we might not understand how some of this is being used positively. We might miss that. We might miss those nuances. Just like when my daughter said, it's relatable. I'm like, really? A guy raising his eyebrows is relatable? But for them it is. So there's some nuances of what's going on in their world that we struggle to get, because it's not the same as our world. And it's fascinating being interested in that. So anyway, we hope you've enjoyed tonight. Sorry for running over. Thank you so much for staying on so long. Thank you for all your input and your content that you share with us. That's really informative and really helpful for us as we develop this workshop. And again, you will receive the resources from us, and you will receive a rather long recording. So thank you so much for your time tonight, and all the best with exploring this world with your children, and helping protect and support them as they navigate this really complex territory. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Bye.